Okay, so that's what we should do when we have a culture that is against God. We should reject it, but when it's for God or when it is neutral. So in my culture, for example, as a Chinese, there's a very strong teaching about respecting your parents, honoring your parents. It's a very confusing thing with the Korean, Japanese, Taiwanese, Chinese, Singaporean. We have a very, and I'm sure also in India, right? Very strong respect for parents and teachers. And that comes from the Bible too. So even if you're not a Christian, it is a cultural thing. Nonetheless, as a Christian, I accept that culture and I continue to practice it. I respect and honor my parents a lot and my teachers a lot. Okay, so here is a religious event called the Passover. Now, the Jewish word for it is Pasach. So when you talk to a Jewish friend, he'll say, I would celebrate Pasach. In English, and the meaning of the word Pasach is to pass over. Why is it called a Passover festival? Because on this night, on the night of the Exodus, God says, I will pass over the houses that have got the blood of the lamb painted on the doorway. Any doorway, Egyptian, African, Israelite, whatever, Chinese if you are in Egypt, you just paint. You just paint and God will pass over you. Okay? So, Passover. Now, very interestingly, several things I want to just highlight, and we will be talking a little bit more about the instructions later on and the festival itself and the meaning to a Christian. But first of all, you need to have a 1-year-old male lamb or goat. Okay, when you are a farmer, the Israelites were not farmers at this time, they are slaves, but later on they will be farmers. If you are a farmer and you are feeding this father cow and mother cow, father cow is called an ox. Yeah. So the ox and the bull and the cow, and then they have a baby, and the baby comes out. First baby in spring. This is March, so it's spring. The first baby that comes out is a very precious baby, isn't it? You've waited a long time for this baby, and God says, slaughter that one. You waited 1 year because you know when it's born it's precious, but you could die. The death rate is something like 20 to 50%. Half your baby cows will die within a year. So you waited 1 whole year, now it's grown up, it's 1 year old, and God says, now slaughter it. Can you imagine how big the sacrifice is? Maybe you're not farmers, you don't realize it. But it's a very big sacrifice, okay? You waited, and you have been feeding this goat or this male sheep for a year, and it's now survived 50% failure rate, and it survived, and then God says, take it away. What is God asking the Israelites to do? Obedience. Obey me, I will provide for you. Don't worry about provision. You know, if you just depend on your skills of being a good farmer, you feed this lamb very carefully and it's growing and growing, you're still depending on your skills. Like Jesus says, I was depending on myself. I'm worshipping my worship. I'm not worshipping God. Yeah, I'm worshipping my sheep, my lamb, my goat. Because I depend on this lamb and this goat. God says, don't depend on this lamb and this goat. Depend on me. Okay, so they had to be very obedient and very trusting of God. And especially they're going on a long journey into the desert. If I kill off my precious lamb, what food am I going to eat in the desert? So there is a lot of sacrifice in a way that God is asking them to do. And life is about sacrifice. Now, we are willing to sacrifice for something good. We will not sacrifice for something bad. We are willing to sacrifice for somebody we love. So God is also saying, do you love me? If you do, you will sacrifice for me. Do you trust me? Because if you do, you will sacrifice this lamb because I ask you to. Those of us who have been, I'm married, so there was a time when I was courting my wife, and I would tell her, I will promise, I will do whatever you ask me to do. I will cross the seas for you. I will climb mountains for you. And then she says, can you please go to the Fairview Mall? I said, oh, sorry, I'm not free. Happens, yeah? Can't cross seas and mountains and everything at Fairview Mall, no. Too easy. So God is saying, you really trust me? You will sacrifice for me? You will love me? Show me. Slaughter this 1-year-old lamb that's so precious to you.
Especially without defect.
Yeah, without defect. God is not saying, send me your leftovers. You know, the lamb that is... You cannot sell, right? Cannot sell, so you might as well sacrifice to God. So, yeah, sometimes we can have sacrifice. Oh, I sacrifice to God. All my lambs that have to God. No. A perfect lamb. Can you sacrifice a perfect lamb to God? Blood. There has to be a slaughter of a lamb, and the blood has to be painted on the doorways. I will bring you to another book in the New Testament. It's called Hebrews, chapters 9 and 10. Next week, maybe we'll look a little deeper on that. But if you go home, you've got a Bible, look at Hebrews chapter 9 and 10. Chapter 9, verse 27.
Just as people are destined to die once, and after that to face judgment, so Christ was sacrificed once to take away the sins of many. And he will appear a second time, not to bear sin, but to bring salvation to those who are waiting for him.
Okay, so Hebrews tells us that there is one life, and after that there is one judgment, and God will judge us. Now, the other verse is Hebrews chapter 9, verse 22.
In fact, the law requires that nearly everything to be cleansed with blood, and without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness.
Without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness. So, these two verses, one says there has to be blood to be shed before forgiveness can come from God. And the other one says, when you finally die, one judgment, one death and one judgment. And when you face God, God says, have you shed blood? Because you want me to forgive you, have you shed blood? And maybe some of you, that's why there are religions where people say, I killed myself for you, God. I sacrificed my life for you. I killed somebody in your name, you know. So God says, no, that is murder.
Yeah.
The punishment that we have, the Bible says, that we have to pay. God sent Jesus to pay for us already. So Hebrews 9 and 10 actually describes to us how God taught the Israelites to first sacrifice a lamb, to understand that a sacrifice of blood is needed. And then when finally they understood it, God says, now Jesus will be your lamb, sacrificed for you. His blood will wash away your sins. So it was like a lesson stage by stage. And the first lesson we learned tonight, they taught, God was teaching them in the Exodus, Passover, a lamb has to sacrifice. And in the New Testament, we are told Jesus is the Lamb of God, the final sacrifice, the final lamb. Okay, so we will be working towards that lesson. I'm just giving you advance notice, so to speak. So Exodus is a very important passage even for Christians, that God is slowly teaching the people of God there is a need for sacrifice, and the sacrifice of the blood of the lamb to wash away the sins. and then the final lamb that God accepts is Jesus himself. Okay, now very interestingly, if you look at chapter 12, the instructions are very, very specific, and there is a reason too. If you look at chapter 12, verse 9, verses 8 and 9, tells us that the lamb has to be roasted, and it has to be roasted along with bitter herbs, and there must be no boiling in water, no raw meat. So, no sashimi. Beef, what's a taka, is it? Beef taka. No raw meat. Why? Raw meat is, of course, the main reason in that time is germs, hygiene. So God didn't want them to get sick, so don't eat raw meat. Also because the Canaanite people, the culture, they offer raw meat to their gods. Yeah, because after that they take it back and they cook it and eat it themselves. But the raw meat is for the gods. So God says, I don't want that kind of sacrifice. So it's not raw meat, but it's roasted. Why roasted? Why not boiled?
Because they were purified in the fire.
Purified in the fire is a good possible answer, but not the real answer.
Tastes better.
Tastes better. It's correct answer, like Carrie's. Good correct answer, but not the real answer.
When you sacrifice the thing to God, the scent,
Scent.
flavor,
Sounds good. Yeah, but God doesn't have a nose. God is not a spirit. God is a spirit. He's not physical. He doesn't need to smell. Yeah, but there's a lot of passages in the Bible that talks about the scent rising up to God. Yeah, it's just human language. Human language. But there's a real human reason, not religious reason. Here,
You don't want to break the lamb?
but that's another answer. That's another answer later on. He says we don't want to break the lamb.
Is it related to the blood?
Not related to the blood.
You can boil it.
It's related to the idea that they have to rush.
roasted take less time?
Yeah, a roast takes less time. Why? Because when you boil something, you got to clean it properly. Because, take out all the intestines and squeeze out whatever is smelly and dirty and so on. Wash it clean, then you boil it. Because otherwise the soup will make the whole, will be untasty and make the whole animal smell too. So boiling needs very thorough cleaning. And you need to wash the pots. And after that you wash the pots again. You wash the pots to boil them and wash the pots after you finish. There's a lot of homework, housework needed to get a boiling pot boiling. The wood.
Sorry. It's also when you boil the water only 100 degrees. When you rotate the temperature much higher.
Yeah, so more purifying, like Carrie says. But the real reason is they had no time. So no time to go and do a proper meal, cook, put salt, pepper, tomato ketchup, You just roast and go. And when you roast a lamb, you just slice the bottom, everything falls out, all the heat will burn up all the germs or whatever also. So they needed to roast because there's a very practical reason they had no time. So the bread, no yeast because no time. And also herbs. Herbs are very easy to pick up. You don't need to cook them. You see the Vietnamese today, the Southeast Asians, a lot of them, you use cumin, you use chives, you use ginger. You don't really need to cook them. They will flavor your food. Herbs flavor your food very fast, and it's easy to eat. You don't really have to cook it a lot, prepare it a lot, just wash it. Now, here in Canada, you may find that some people will pronounce it herb. Okay, Americans pronounce it herb because it's a French influence. The French don't pronounce the H. So in Canada, there are French people around, they pronounce it as herb rather than herb. The British pronounce it as herb. So either way, people will understand you. Herb. Okay, so herbs are very practical too. They flavor the food and yet they're easy to pick up and clean. Now, verse 11, this is how you're going to eat it, with your cloak. Your cloak is your outer clothing. Okay, when you travel, you have a cloak outside your winter jacket, for example. So this is not winter, this is spring, so they just need a light coat. So a cloak tucked into your belt. When you are at home, you want to be comfortable, everything is loose. When you are traveling, you tie with a belt. So they are to eat their food as if they are about to travel. So maybe Yuki was eating at the airport because she has to eat very quickly and run, right? So you have no time to do your ordinary meal. You eat with a cloak tucked into your belt, your sandals on your feet because sandals are for traveling, and you have a staff in your hand. You don't eat with a stick in your house, right? What do you want to eat with a stick in the house for? You're about to travel, you need the walking stick. That's why you need a staff in your hand. So they are to live their life as if they are to go any moment. God says now, and they are ready to run. Okay, no, sorry God, can you wait another 10 minutes? I need to go and find my winter jacket. I need to go, oh, where's my belt? Where's my credit card? Where's God? No, you are ready to go. Any moment God says, go now, you are ready to go. You don't say, sorry God, I gotta wait. Okay, and that's again obedience. Are you able to say, God, any moment you call me, if you ask me, leave Canada, go someplace else, I will go now, and I will go without question. So that was the evidence of their willingness to obey, to obey God. Now, there is another thing that is kind of hard for them to accept. Remember, we have read 11 chapters, 9 plagues. God sends plague after plague after plague, and you would think that Pharaoh would have been convinced that God is powerful and he should let the Hebrews go. But he hasn't done so yet. So can you imagine the plagues get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and Pharaoh says, no, 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 no. How do you think the 10th one will be when Pharaoh will say yes? Maybe Pharaoh will say no again. So if Pharaoh says no again, God, you're wasting my time. I need to watch my LA Lakers. So I'm not ready to go because I need to watch my, the game is going on right now. I have my own pursuit means, God, I have no time for you. I'm not ready for you. And God says, no, if I call you and you're not ready, you stay. And when you stay in Egypt, you die. So that obedience of, you may not know when, you may not believe it is now, but God says it will be now, so believe it. There is another point here about keeping the bones. I think Raymond was talking about keeping the whole animal intact and unbroken. This is in verse 46. The instruction in chapter 12, verse 46, it must be eaten inside the house. Take none of the meat outside the house. Do not break any of the bones. Do not break any of the bones. Sounds like a very strange instruction. What's so important about not breaking the bones? John chapter 19, and I think verse 36. When Jesus was on a cross and he's dying, and then he died. Now, John tells us it was a holy day, and the Jews don't like to have corpses hanging on the crosses on a holy day. The next day was going to be a holy day. So the Jews went to the Roman emperor and said, please take down all the corpses. It offends us to have corpses hanging out in the air. So the Roman emperor was willing to do that. And the Roman governor was willing to do that. So, but they want these people to die before they get taken down. Okay, now crucifixion is a very cruel death, a very slow death. You hang there by, your hands and your legs. What they're trying to do is they make you suffocate yourself. Because as you are so weak, and then you go down, and your whole body weight is on your lungs, and you go down, and you cannot breathe. Then they put a piece of wood under your leg. If you see the movie, you see there's a piece of wood under Jesus' legs. And you go down, you cannot breathe, and you push up. When you push up, your lungs will clear up and you can breathe again. So you are dying, live, dying, live. It's a slow death. And normally it takes many days to die. 3-4 days to die. But it's a holy day tomorrow. And the Jews said, we don't want any dead bodies hanging up there. So the only way to kill them immediately is they come round and they break the legs. Bang, bang. And when the legs are broken, when they go down, they cannot push up again, so they die, suffocate. But when they came to Jesus, John says, he was already dead. So there was no need to break his bones. And Jesus died without his bones broken. The Passover lamb's bones are not broken. That was the significance. And it goes all the way to the New Testament before we realize that's the significance. Of course, in Exodus, probably the significance would be to they eat the lamb together in one household. It's a community that eats, not an individual that eats. It's a symbol of unity. The bones, the whole lamb is one whole piece without any brokenness. Israel was to be united as they went out into the desert. They had to be united. Okay. Any questions, comments?
About the yeast, did you explain when it was out why God repeated a lot of time not put the yeast in your bread?
God repeated a lot of times what?
About the yeast.
Oh, the yeast.
Not to put yeast in the bread.
Yes.
If you put the yeast,
Good
it will
question.
be-
The yeast, God keeps repeating about the yeast. Don't make sure there is no yeast in the house, right? And make sure in verse 15 it says, go through the whole house, check that there's no yeast. Yeast flies around, it's fungus spores, and it flies around. So make sure you clean the whole house so clean that there will be no yeast that will settle on your dough and then make it into a leavened bread rather than unleavened. The Jews later on understood, and in the New Testament we understand, yeast, Paul uses yeast as a symbol, and Jesus too as a symbol of immorality, of sin. There must be no sin in your life when you come before God and worship the holy festival of Passover. There must be no sin in your household. The yeast is a representative of sin. It's a symbolic representation of sin. No sin in your lives. Worship God with purity. So so you have to go through the drama of going through the house, checking, cleaning up so that there's no more yeast. And it's every year this is repeated as a demonstration, a very visual demonstration of the fact that God wants purity in our lives and in our families. It's a very powerful lesson. God was teaching them a lesson that was very visual. Every year they will reenact. Actually, in a Jewish home, the Passover meal, the father will ask a set of questions before they start the meal. You know, the father will ask the youngest son. Traditionally, there's a son. The youngest son will be answering the answers. He knows after many years all the answers, of course. But the ceremony begins with the father saying, "Why do we celebrate this?" The son will answer, "Because the Lord delivered us from Egypt." Okay, so we will be reading that more carefully. God says, forever this will be an event you will commemorate and remember. And we will find out why. Now, I will finish with this very interesting observation. I'm a Chinese, and as I said, maybe some of you have got similar cultures. But in Chinese culture, we have Chinese New Year. And I remember from young being taught, this is how we celebrate Chinese New Year. First of all, we paint the house nice and red. And on our door frames, we paste 3 strips of paper. Men lian, 3. And the day before Chinese New Year, we sweep the house clean. Exodus 12 verse 42. There's something else that we Chinese do that the Jews did. Verse 42. Because the Lord kept vigil that night to bring them out of Egypt, on this night all the Israelites are to keep vigil to honor the Lord for the generations to come. To keep vigil, it means to keep watch. Vigil, to keep watch when people are sleeping. That's called a vigil. So when there's a funeral, Chinese funeral, we also keep vigil when people are sleeping. We're watching the corpse, the coffin. So Chinese New Year, the night before Chinese New Year, I was always taught stay awake for as long as you can. The whole night if you can. Keep vigil, because then what's the reason, do you know? Long life to who? Your parents. You keep vigil so that your parents will have long life. And I'm reading Exodus and say, paint the door frame, clean the house, keep vigil. Was there some time in the past in Chinese history when the Chinese understood God's commands for them? I went to Beijing one year, 2004, and I had this special tour to bring me to the Temple of Heaven, Tiantai, the Temple of Heaven. And when there, my guest told me, I don't think he knew I was a Christian. My host tells me, this Temple of Heaven is where the Emperor of China went every year to offer sacrifices to the God of Heaven, the Emperor of Heaven, right? And he says, give me and my people good harvest and good weather and so on. Okay, the Emperor is the Son of Heaven, and he's asking his Father, Father in heaven, please give me a good harvest. And he sacrifices what? A lamb. Not chicken, not duck, not fish, not Beijing duck. A lamb. And so in the Chinese culture, there's this word gao yang, the sacrificial lamb. It is there in Chinese culture. And then you in the Temple of Heaven, Tiantan, there are no images. The Chinese have got lots of images. They've got temples all over the place and images but in the Temple of Heaven, there is not a single idol, not a single statue. And the Emperor is told, no statues in this temple. Is there something in Chinese culture way back 3,000 years ago? God too had spoken. And maybe he spoke to everybody. And the Jews, and maybe the Chinese were there. Because let me point out to you one verse before we close, and that is in verse 38. See, the journey begins in verse 37. The Israelites journeyed from Ramesses, where they lived, to Sukkoth, and there were 600,000 men on foot, besides women and children. And verse 38, many other people went up with them, and also large droves of livestock, both flocks and herds. Many other people, not just Jews, not just the Israelites. And if you look at chapter 9, okay, Exodus chapter 9, and in verse 20, those officials of Pharaoh who feared the word of the Lord hurried to bring their slaves and their livestock inside, and so they escaped the hailstone plague. So in Egypt, there were Egyptians who believed God, Yahweh. There were other people. Egypt was like America and Canada, Toronto, everybody wants to go there. And there were a lot of other people in Egypt too, and many of them said, we believe in this God, Yahweh. So many other people went out of Egypt together with the Israelites, even though they were not slaves. God, right from the beginning, has always said, I'm not just a God of the Jews, I'm a God of the whole world. And I think maybe somewhere inside there was a Chinese who went back to China and spread the story. There is a God who demands sacrifice, a Gao Yang.
Yeah, also the Chinese New Year, the day before, you don't go out. You stay in the house. Because there's a monster come to you.
Indian monster, yeah. Don't go out, stay in.
You cannot go out. So everybody stay at home.
Death may come.
Similar.
The red protection. But we know, of course, then as a Chinese Christian, I say, my protection doesn't come from the Lian, my protection comes from God. And I am not afraid. But I think 3,000 years ago, 1,500 BC is the Exodus. 1,500 BC in China was the Shang dynasty. Shang dynasty. And the Temple of Heaven continues a practice that goes all the way to the Shang dynasty. So I don't know, it could be speculation, but I think it's very interesting to think that maybe back there was an ancestor of mine, of the Chinese people,